we're done with the part one. So we're moving forward. Let's say part two. So in part two of this same topic called coordination and response, we'll be looking at sense organs, and basically this is the syllabus content. All what you need to know about sense organs. Any form of question that will be asked will be based on everything that is here. So if you want to pause and go through it, because this will be more like our objective for the lesson. So sound a sound a little bit crazy that I want to cover this whole stuff in approximately, let's say, like 20 minutes, but hopefully we'll be able to do it. Now we should be able to define sense organs. If you are asked to define a sense organ in the exam, this is it. So define the sense organ as a group of receptor cells responding to specific stimuli: light, sound, touch, temperature, and chemicals. Why we should be able to identify the structure of the eye limited to, look at this, structure of the eye limited to cornea, iris, pupil, lens, retina, optic nerves, and blind spot. So this is the whole part they needed to know and be able to say their functions. So the functions of this part, you are just expected to identify them and also know their function. It's simple. You can see from here, the cornea help to refract light, iris control the amount of light that enters into the pupil, and lens focus light onto the retina. Then the retina itself contain light receptors, majorly the cones and rods, and sensitive to light of different colors, that's colored and black and white images. The optic nerves carry impulses to the brain. Take note, not to the spinal cord, to the brain. Now, explain the pupil reflex in terms of light intensity and pupil diameter. So we'll look at pupil reflex in detail. Then explain pupil reflex in terms of light intensity and antagonistic action. That's for the extended aspect. So quickly, you can pause, read through it because we're going to cover both the core and extended aspect. Now, what is a sense organ? Simple. Sense organs are a group of receptor cells responding to specific stimuli such as light, sound, touch, temperature, and chemicals, exactly the way it is in your syllabus. I've seen students where they just get some random definition about some of these major key terms in an exam, and you won't get the full mark. You have to be very conversant and used to your syllabus. Now, sense organs, what it is sensitive to, and the senses. The various sense organs we have in our body are the skin, which is sensitive to pressure, heat, heat and cold, such as temperature and pain. You see, in an exam, I've seen where they say, okay, list two, and somebody will write heat and cold. Heat separate as one and cold separate as the other. It won't go. Both of them are temperature. So if you write one, you can't get 2 marks for that description. And pain. So they are sense to touch and temperature. Then your tongue is actually sensitive to chemicals and has to do with taste. Your nose is also sensitive to chemicals in the air and it has to do with smell. Your ear is sensitive to sound and movement. Sound and movement. And its senses is hearing and balance. And the eye is sensitive to light, which is used for sight. Now, inside the eye, so now let's look at the structure of the eye. Remember, your syllabus objective is to be able to identify the various parts of the eye. So let's see. First, this is called the cornea at the surface of the eye, and its major function is to refract. That means to bend light as it enters the eye. To reflect, to bend light as it enters into the eye. Then we now have the suspensory and ligament. Suspensory ligament, they help to hold the lens in place. The suspensory ligament help to hold the lens in place. Then we have the lens itself, which focuses light onto the retina. So that will now take us to the iris. And the iris function is to regulate amount of light entering the eye. First, look at this, so you won't get confused. You move to the cornea first, refract light as it enters the eye. Then iris regulate the amount. Cornea refract, iris regulate the amount, lens focus the light onto the retina. Then we also have the ciliary muscles, change shape of the lens. So the supersensory and ciliary muscles help in accommodation. So which we'll look at shortly though. So they change shape of the lens and they both act as antagonistic pairs. If one contracts, the other will relax. So we'll look at it. Then optic nerve is also a nerve cell and it helps to transmit impulse to the brain. It's a nerve cell that helps to transmit impulse to the brain. Then we have the retina. Now, the retina contain light receptors. Some are sensitive to light of different colors. So on the retina here, we also look at the distribution of what is called the rods, and we look at the rods and cone cells. Rods and cone cells. Now, this is sensitive to um, color vision, and this is responsible for black and white vision. This is in an area where there is high light intensity, low light intensity. So let's move quickly. Now, pupil reflex. How does the pupil reflex in the presence of light and in the absence of light? So now, this is a reflex action carried out to protect the retina from damage. That's the essence of pupil reflex. It helps to protect the retina from damage. So take note of that. You might just see it as a one mark question. Pupil reflex help to protect the retina from damage. Now, in bright light and protect us from not seeing object in dim light. So you see, in dim light, the pupil dilate. That is, it becomes larger, it widens. In dim light, that's in the absence of light. If you walk into a dark room, what will happen to your pupil is that it will dilate to become larger in size. Now, but quickly, you see, this here is the pupil. This part here forms the pupil. So, sorry, it's not, okay, I think this part forms the pupil. So we'll look at it shortly, though. Um, so, in dim light, the pupil dilates, it widens in order to allow as much light into the eye as possible. While in bright light, what happens is the pupil constricts, so it becomes narrow in order to prevent too much light entering the eye and damaging the retina. So let's look at this quick animation to see how it works. Now this is the pupil, which is the dark black spot inside. Now light receptors in the eye can be damaged by excess light. So how does the eye protect itself? Now first, you see, when the light is off, what happens? The pupil is larger. The pupil is larger. So but when the light is on, the pupil becomes smaller. Let me turn off the light. So if I turn off the light, the pupil becomes larger, the iris get narrower. Now the pupil dilate to let more light in. Iris get narrower, then the pupil will dilate to let more light in. Remember, the iris control the amount of light that enters into the eye. So when the iris get narrower, the pupil will get larger to what increase the amount of light that will go into the eye in when you enter into a dark room. But when you enter into a light room where there's enough light, the iris will get wider, then the pupil will constrict to reduce the amount of light moving into the eyes. So quickly, you see, we will now look at, sorry, dim light and bright light. What is actually happening here? So in dim light, this is dim light. In dim light, the pupil dilates, becomes larger to allow more light enter the eye to improve vision. While in bright light, the pupil constrict gets smaller to allow less light to enter the eye in order to protect it from damage. Now, exam extended only. How does the pupil reflex work? So for extended syllabus, you need to be able to describe how this process works. Now, there are two types of muscles that are involved. We have the radial and circular muscles. The radial and circular muscles. Now, in dim light, so diagram showing the eye in a dim light. So in dim light, you have your radial muscles of the iris will contract, while your circular muscles will relax. This will now make the what? pupil to dilate, to become larger, to allow more light into the eye. Now, these both work as antagonistic pairs. That means if the radial muscle is relaxed, the circular muscle will what? Um, Contract, thereby the pupil will not dilate, to become smaller in the case of a bright light. So photoreceptors detect changes in the environment in a dark light. So photoreceptors will detect changes and send stimulus to through the nerve cells to the brain, which will now send signal to let these radial and circular muscles to carry out responses. So the radial muscles will contract while circular muscles will relax, then pupil will dilate. That means the diameter of the pupil widens, so more light will now enters the eye. So so you see, if let me draw something here. If this is the circular muscles, find that they're like this. Sorry, I'm just trying to. Then the radial muscles just cut across here. Then you now have your pupil inside. So in case you get a diagram, they expect you to identify radial and circular muscles from the term though. So circular muscles, radial muscles. So obviously, when this relaxes, this will become larger. Once this relaxes, this will contract. So once this contract that is pressed, it will draw this one backward for it to become larger and the pupil will dilate. But once this one relaxes, then this will now come forward and the pupil will contract. So let's say in bright light. Now, in bright light is just the opposite. Radial muscles relax, so circular muscle contract, then the pupil will become less to reduce the amount of light that enters into the retina. Now, next, let's look at accommodation. That's viewing near and distant object. Accommodation, viewing near and distant object. Accommodation, viewing near and distant object. So the way the lens bring about fine focusing is called accommodation. The way the lens bring about fine focusing of light onto the retina is called accommodation. Now the lens is elastic and its shape can be changed when the suspensory ligament attached to it become tight or loose. So obviously now you need to know that the suspensory ligament controls the shape of the iris, of the lens. So the changes are brought about by the contraction and relaxation of ciliary muscles. Sorry for my pronunciation, please. Ciliary muscles. So now, in this case, drawing diagram showing the eye when an object is close. So we look at focusing at near object and far object. So this object is close, near object. So what will happen? The suspensory ligament will slacken, so the ciliary muscles contract. So once the ciliary muscle contracts, the suspensory ligament will slacken. So it will now make the lens to become flatter. So it will be able to light is reflected more by lens to focus on near object. So you see, ciliary muscle contracts, suspensory ligament slackens. Once this contract, this will slacken. Both still act as antagonistic pairs. Once the ciliary muscles contract, suspensory ligaments will slackens. These allow lens to become flatter. Light is now reflected more. So I'll come back to that shortly. Now, but if you want to focus on a distant object, so this object is quite far, distant object. Sorry, here the lens become fatter. I was calling flatter sense. I don't know. Okay. When you want to focus on distant object, first the ciliary muscle will relax, and once it relaxes, the suspensory ligament contracts. That's a stretch and thin. So once this contracts, it draws it makes it thinner. So more light to allow for more light to pass through it. So light is reflected less and allowing the eye to focus on a distant object. So look at this quickly. Now for distant objects, the focus To focus on the distant object, the lens need to be thin to bend the light rays less. So this lens need to be thinner to bend the light rays less. So ciliary muscles here relaxes and the muscle ring get larger. So ciliary muscles relaxes. Then it will now tighten up the suspensory ligament. So suspensory ligament will tighten once this relaxes and the lens become thinner. So while in the case of let me just distant object, let's focus it and see. You see, this is what happens. Next, in near object, how does the eye focus on near object? So in the case of near object, the lens need to become larger. So the ciliary muscles will tighten up and the suspensory ligament will slacken to make the lens larger. Now to focus on the close object, the lens need to be thick to bend the light rays. So let me just do this again. First, to focus now, you find out that this is the shape. Just look at what will happen to the ciliary and supersensory ligament. Well, the ciliary ligament relaxes, the suspensory ligament tightens to make the lens thinner to be able to focus more light onto the retina. But in the case of close object, ciliary muscles tighten, suspensory ligament slackens, and to allow the light to be focused more on the retina. So next we look at this more like a summary. Summary. Object far away, object close. What will happen? Ciliary muscles relax, suspensory ligament pull tight. This is for far object. Then lens becomes thinner. Then for close object, ciliary muscles will contract, suspensory ligament will slack, and lens will become fatter. So I said we'll look at rods and cones. There are two types of receptor cells in the retina, two types, and these are called the rods and the cone cells. Rods are sensitive to dim light, while cones are which distinguish different colors in bright light. So there are three types of cone cells which are sensitive to different colors of light, which are sensitive to red, blue, and green, which are the primary colors. So combination of these different colors will give it of these three, we give it different colors. Now the fovea is an area on the retina where almost all of the cone cells are found. Almost all of the cone cells are found on the fovea, while the rod cells are found all over the retina, other than the area where the optic nerve attaches to the retina. So area where the optic nerve attaches to the retina, you don't find rod cells there. There are no light sensitive cells at all in this area, and so it is usually referred to as the blind spot. So no light sensitive cell along this area. So quickly before I go back to this, you see, let me use the diagram of an eye to explain that rods and cone cells and where the fovea is found. Now you see, okay, it's not here, though it's found on the retina. Let me see. Another diagram of an eye, please. Quick. Okay, good. Now remember, this is the retina where light focus on. So if light focus on the retina there, you find out that light focuses here on the retina. Then this area of small depression here is what is called the fovea. So that fovea have high concentration of rods and cone cells, high concentration of cone cells. Then the area where the optic nerves reach the retina, that's this point here, there is no light sensitive cells. So in that area you can't find cones, neither can you find rods. So it is usually referred to as the blind spot. So we'll look at sample exam questions, which I will now explain this concept also in full, looking at it how questions come out. in relation to that. So thank you. See you in 3 point in the third part of this